This is the Detroit Sports Podcast Network.
Hello 313, hello Michigan, and welcome to this week's show, Travel Basketball with Gus Weaver on the Detroit Sports Podcast Network. I'm your host. This is something a little bit original. This is something that hasn't been done around these parts in terms of a podcast show or a radio show. And what we do is we talk travel basketball dedicated to the youth. We like to give exposure to some of the teams, some of the kids that we think deserve it, who aren't, out there in the limelight, so to speak. That's why we do this. And who am I? I'm Gus Weaver. I have a basketball background. I'm a director currently of the 313 Hot Boys. And one thing we try to do every week is bring in a special guest, coaches, directors, referees. This week, we have a very special guest, Ruben Tompkins. He's the founder and the coach of Urban Underdogs Basketball. They're out of Pontiac, Michigan. Pretty new team on the circuit, but these guys are traveling. They're doing well. They're winning some tournaments. Right now, they're up to 4 teams, the Urban Underdogs. So we will chat with him. We'll look ahead to a big-time Nationals tournament being held in Pigeon Forge, Tennessee. 100-plus teams registered for this thing. It's going to be a big deal. It's a tourist attraction out there, so we'd be doing ourselves an injustice if we didn't take a look at that. Later on in this show, we'll discuss a little bit about LeBron James, and we'll leave it at that. We've touched on him slightly the last 2 weeks, I believe, of this podcast. We've very slightly touched on LeBron in terms of, not so much his gameplay, but where he'll be playing ball next season. So we'll briefly touch on that. I'll ask Mr. Ruben Tompkins about what he feels, where he feels LeBron should be next year. Should be a pretty good show. We'll always get involved in our shout-out portion of the program. We've been doing this for over a month now. What I've asked is anybody that's running the program in terms of travel basketball, if you're a coach, you're a player, you're a director, if you have anything worthy of a shout out, you got a big tournament coming up, you're looking for teams to get in, you got a hot player that's really on a roll right now, you guys on an amazing winning streak, are you traveling to Nationals? Please provide me with that information and I will give you a shout out. And I post this on the social media sites. How do you know if your program is being talked about, if you got a player being discussed on this show, if you don't tune in? Hands in the air, right? You got to tune in to know what's going on. We're getting a lot of positive feedback. We're slowly growing this audience, and it's a good original format to talk sports about, in specifics, travel basketball. So to get right into the meat and potatoes of this program, like I told you, we do have a special guest. He hails from Pontiac, Michigan. His team is the Urban Underdogs. They're all over social media. Please go check these guys out. As promised, our special guest, the founder of the Urban Underdogs Basketball program out of Pontiac, Michigan. He's a coach. They got 4 teams strong, a young program on the rise. Please welcome Ruben Tompkins. Ruben, welcome to this week's show.
Hey man, how's it going?
Going well, man. I hope everything's going well with you from an outsider looking in to everything you guys post on social media. Seems like your program is definitely headed in the right direction.
Oh yeah, man. We're trying to just keep the boys working, man, and keep them busy, keep them doing something positive.
That's the name of the game, man. From so many people that I talk to, not just here in Michigan, but all around in the urban areas. It's just good. It's a positive thing for the kids to do. Keep them out of the negative things, so to speak. And I salute you, man, because I know it's not an easy task. It's not really a rewarding gig other than, you're doing what's right. For our listeners, this is a show that we do every week. Every week we try to have a guest on tell our listeners a little bit about your background and what made you start the Urban Underdogs basketball team.
First, I appreciate you for having me on here. But I grew up loving basketball since a young age. Always loved the game, loved playing every chance I could get. I played through all the way up through high school. I didn't go into college playing or anything like that, and play overseas or in the NBA or nothing like that. I did a year in college. I went to OCC. I didn't play there or nothing. I really got into basketball really from a coaching aspect, starting with my son. Started working with him, but I ventured off and started my own program just because up there in Pontiac, it's not really nothing for kids to do. Like, we don't have a community center up here.
Mm-hmm.
We only have one middle school and one high school. We don't have no kind of city sports, no football, city basketball, city baseball, anything like that. So I really got into it, to give kids something to do, and to keep them out of the negative, like you had said. I grew up playing AAU. I played AAU with a team from around here, Tri-County Cobras. They just kind of started back up really with I think they got first and second graders. But when I was younger, I played with the Tri-County Cobras up here. I went to Pontiac Central High School and Lakeland High School. That's kind of out in the suburbs.
Mm-hmm.
Up here, I played varsity. I started playing varsity in 10th grade, point guard. And like I said, I didn't go off into college or anything like that. I was, kind of one of those kids that had it kind of rough and not didn't have too much guidance. But this is something that I love doing. I love being a part of.
I'm sure the kids love it too, man. It gives them something to do, and like you said, coming up, how you came up, like you see, that aspect of it, and me personally, anytime you can start something and have some youth involved, especially like you said up there in Pontiac, there isn't much for the kids to do in terms of sports, like no city leagues, nothing like that, and it's a lot of talented kids up there in that area. So it's
right.
It's sad that they ain't able to just go sign up and play like most kids are, especially in the suburban areas. There's no shortage of any type of league, whether it be soccer, baseball, like anything you want to get into, you live in the right area, it's provided to you. And it's sad that in some of these areas, the urban areas, man, it's just not. My hometown, Inkster, is kind of the same way. It went through that. Now Inkster, they do have a few Little League football teams. They do have a baseball program now again, but, that went away for some years, and it's sad to see. But I commend you once again for doing what you're doing. What you guys got coming up in terms of any tournaments you guys hosting or anything?
No, we not hosting nothing. We only been I started this about a year ago, and we had took maybe 5 or 6 months off, and so we kind of still really fresh. When I first started off, it was just one team, and then like I said, we had took a break for about 5 or 6 months, and then when we came back, we had tryouts, and I had the original kids that I started with, and then we ended up having tryouts, and we had added 2 more teams, and then those were the younger ones, because I have a 4th grade, 2 5th grade, and a 6th and 7th grade team. Mm-hmm. And the 6th and 7th grade team is the one that was just most recently added. We haven't been able to go our own tournaments or anything like that yet.
Right.
Still kind of
that's
freshly getting into it. Yeah.
That's difficult to do. That's a big step, man. When you go from just playing in tournaments to hosting tournaments. I know my organization is looking into that, but it's a slow process because it's a lot of money involved. It's a lot of logistics involved, and it's just not something for. It's just my opinion. These brand new programs, man. It's hard enough just trying to build a team and get some consistency.
Get consistency. Get some, like me, I see a lot of teams that they kind of just try to go get players that already established, already like kind of elite, like with the kids that I started with. I started them, they was playing in the school league at my son's school, and they would only practice one time a week for an hour, like one day a week for 1 hour, and I went to one of the practices, and I mean, they wasn't doing nothing but lay up line and run a few laps and scrimmage a little bit, and the practice was over with. So I had started taking like the kids that my son was foolish with, like his best friends, which was like two brothers and another kid, and I would just take them to like different gyms where you just pay to go and play open gym, and I would take them where it wasn't that many people in there where I could work with them, and I would just pay to just take all of them in there and just work with them, and I got started. My assistant coach, actually, brother, is one of my son's closest friends, and we was at the games, and we used to be coaching from the sideline. And he was like, man, we should get them together and go take them and work with them. And I was like, I already do that. I take like 3 or 4 of them. And he was like, well, I don't mind helping you out. That's my brother right there. And his brother and my son, they was already good friends. So I was like, all right, that's cool. We can come together and keep working with them. And that's how we started. That's how we started the original team. And I still have those same original kids, like a part of the program. And like you said, it's hard getting that consistency and getting the parent support.
Yep.
Because like with a lot of the kids, I pick them up for practice 3 times a week, drop them off. I pick them up for tournaments, drop them off. Some of them, they can't come up with the funds, so when I can, I pay for everything for them to play. We just started fundraising so we can get to, we got Chicago coming up July 7th, and we got Indiana June 29th to July 1st.
That's good that you guys are able to get out there and travel, man. I know that was, when we started, we played locally, but the end game was to get out and make a name for ourselves, hopefully perform well when we travel. And in our second year, we wanted to be a level where we could compete at a national tournament. And, I think as long as you follow whatever steps you got in place, I wish y'all a lot of success. And I've seen your athletes, y'all got some heck of a ballers over there. Seem like you got good coaching. And more than anything, you got somebody to care when I'm talking about you, because you have to care to do all of this that you're doing, man. You're talking about picking up players for practice, dropping them off, taking them to tournaments, fronting the money sometimes if people can't come up with it. I'm way familiar with all of that, and once again, I commend you, man. I think you're doing a good job, and you're doing something that these kids, they'll never forget. Like, no matter what happens, they won't forget these times because it's fun times for them. I know it's stressful sometimes for the adults, but the kids are having fun, they're making memories, and that in some ways, that's what it's all about. Let me ask you this, man, real quick, because we are running a little bit short on time. Just to switch gears, to go from to talk about travel basketball in the youth. Now I'm gonna ask you an NBA question, which is kind of straight up opposites. But your opinion, where do you see LeBron James playing next year? Because we're gonna touch on this later on in this show. I'd like to get your opinion.
Me personally, where I would like to see him go would be Houston, and I say that because he had his role in the Eastern Conference, and at home at Cleveland, I feel like he did all that he can for that organization.
Right.
And the only way I could see him possibly staying is if they get better talent around him, obviously, because it's going to be hard for him to keep putting up 40 points a game, getting triple doubles in the playoffs, and you still coming up losing. I like LeBron. I really don't like when people bash LeBron because of, he's such a great player and they feel like he's supposed to do everything and still come out on top. At the end of the day, basketball it's a team sport. So you got him putting up 50 points a game, getting triple doubles. Like, he needs some help. If you ask me, Jordan had some help. Obviously, Steph and Clay, they have help. All good elite teams have help. Nobody did it by itself. So the only way I see him staying in Cleveland is if they get him some better help around him.
Yeah, I understand that. It's sad to say some of these teams that I don't want to use the word fail when I mention LeBron, but when you get to the finals and lose, like that's a failed attempt. Some of these teams that he's went to the finals with, they were guys that he wanted. You know what I mean? Like he's almost playing a GM role in the past where he said, hey, I want this guy, or, guys want to play with him so they'll sign there. And then it's almost like, people want to talk about the team, but it's the team that he wanted. So it's kind of a double-edged sword for LeBron. You know how, like you said, you don't like to hear people bash him. This is one guy that's never been in trouble, take care of his family, done all the right things, and he's the most scrutinized, criticized athlete of my generation, like by far. And it is unfair to him. It is unfair.
Right. And I like that you did say that he played that GM role and that the players that he did put around him, he wanted those guys and kind of requested those guys to come and they wanted to play with him. I like that you said that too, because a lot of people do leave that out.
Yeah. But I wish LeBron all the best, man. We had a Twitter poll, and the number one team that people thought he would go to was the 76ers. Houston was a close second. I personally want to see him go to New Orleans and see what happens. Ruben, before I let you go, man, tell our listeners if you're on any social sites in terms of your basketball squad or where they can follow you at and catch up with what your basketball team is doing.
Okay, yes. We on Instagram at Urban, URBAN, Underdogs, UNDERDOGS, B-Ball, BBALL. That's all we got. We got the Instagram page. And also we do team gear. If anybody wants some team gear, shirts, socks, backpack, jerseys, anything like that, you could contact my email, REUBEN.TOMPKINS@yahoo.com. Thanks for having me on, man.
Hey, man, I appreciate you. To everybody listening, y'all need some gear. You want to lock up a scrimmage. You want to see if they got some openings. Get in touch with them on social media. Email them. Ruben Tompkins, it's been a pleasure, man. Thank you for coming on with us.
Thanks, man. I appreciate it.
So earlier I mentioned this big-time Nationals tournament being held Wednesday of next week in Pigeon Forge, Tennessee. So far, and I think this is final, 128 teams confirmed, ranging from grade 2nd all the way through an 11th and 12th grade combined division. And this is a big deal. So for all of you that aren't familiar with the way these Nationals tournaments are set up, there are plenty of them spread throughout the country. Orlando was probably the biggest one. They got a big one out west. This one in Tennessee obviously is big with 128 teams, but they are spread throughout the Midwest, and it's highly competitive, very difficult to win these tournaments. So difficult that if you do win, you get a ring, just like you win an NBA title, you get your championship ring. It's very fun for the kids. It's always a lot of attractions and things to do at these destinations, or it wouldn't be a destination for a Nationals tournament. So to host this many teams, it's hosted by Teammate Basketball. You guys can follow them on Twitter if you're on Twitter at Teammate Hoops. They do a great job. So from my personal experience, we took our 6th grade boys, class 2024, to a Teammate Hoops tournament, and the winner of this tournament got a free bid to go to this Nationals tournament that we're talking about right now. The tournament that we attended was in South Carolina. We came up short, losing to a very tough, talented Team 200. That was their name, Team 200. They're from South Carolina. Come up short in the championship game against those guys. But and I'm telling you this to tell you how well orchestrated and well put together this tournament was by Teammate Hoops. They really know what they're doing. They're vested in this. They're experienced in it, and they really put on a good time. Good facilities, quality. Food, snacks, all of that matters to the parents. When you're going somewhere like that. Cleanliness of the venue. How organized is it? And Teammate Hoops does a great job. So needless to say, Pigeon Forge, Tennessee. Me personally, I've never been down there, but I only hear great things about it, and I've always wanted to go down there and experience the whole cabin thing. Never really had the opportunity, but we're going to this. Now, I mentioned that we came up short on an automatic bid, a free bid, a paid bid. So we actually paid the money to get in this tournament and try to redeem ourselves a little bit. So, quickly, if you guys know Pigeon Forge, you know about the amusement park, in Dollywood, you know about the water parks, you know all the attractions there. So it's really a great place to host a tournament of this magnitude with 128 teams registered, locked and loaded, ready to go really quick. Now, normally when we preview a tournament, we give you a little bit of insight from each age group. I tell you who I see coming out in the championship games. Now, for this Nationals tournament, it's a little different because there are so many teams. There's no way possible I could go through this with you in the time we have allotted for this show in terms of trying to touch every team. We cannot do that. But what we can do, I can mention to you, I've done some research once I found out what teams are going to be in this tournament. And I've looked a lot of these guys up on social media, on the internet. I can tell you a little bit. But what I will do is tell you exactly how many teams are in each age group. I'll tell you what states they're from because these teams are coming from all around the country. And it's amazing to me. And I'm excited to go there. Let's jump right into it. And these guys are starting out at second grade, like I mentioned. You got 4 teams in the second grade division. These are from Georgia and North Carolina. I did some research on these guys. It looks like a team goes by the name of YKD Kings, and the Georgia Grizzlies are ready to do battle in the second grade division. If you look at the third grade, and you'll notice the number of teams will start to rise, as we go all the way through the middle school. Third grade has 5 teams. Those teams are from Georgia and Kentucky. And I'm really looking at the Georgia Prospects Elite. I actually heard a little bit about these guys. I heard they're talented at the third grade level, like I always tell you. Second, third, fourth grade teams, if you got a good backcourt, you stand a good chance of winning. And that's what I heard about the Georgia Prospects Elite. They got quite a nice guard combo down there. Fourth grade division, you got 10 teams ranging states-wise. Georgia, Tennessee, North Carolina, Ohio, South Carolina. Big-time program from Ohio traveling down, Miller Factory. They're putting more than one team in this tournament, looking for them to do big things. And the Atlanta Nets. Also, YKD Kings is something that I'm looking for out of this fourth grade. And this is what it is. Big-time teams. Miller Factory, YKD Kings, Atlanta Nets. All are in Pool B. Now, there's 4 different pools in this age group, but these 3 powerhouse programs are all in one pool. So we'll see how that shakes out. Let's look at the 5th grade. You got 14 teams in the 5th grade division. Georgia, Maryland, Tennessee, North Carolina, Louisiana, West Virginia, all represented in the 5th grade division. I'm looking for North Carolina Showtime Hoops. These guys are from North Carolina. I'm hearing big things about them. And I'm hearing good things about the CP Rim Rockers. A nice program for the Rim Rockers. So we'll see how that shakes out. Look, once again, I don't know if you guys can tell in my voice, but I'm extra excited to see all of these teams in person. It's one thing to look them up, on Instagram or on Twitter or on YouTube. It's a whole nother animal when you actually get to see them in person. And I'm excited. Let's look at the 6th grade division. That's the division that our 313 Hot Boys are competing in. And there's 18 teams in this division. It's going to be a tough one to, even make the Final Four will be tough. These teams are coming from South Carolina, Tennessee, Michigan, Georgia, Ohio, North Carolina. A couple of teams I got my eye on that I've actually seen in person there's a team from Michigan traveling down here, RA1. I think that stands for Run As One. But they made it all the way to the championship game at the Moneyball tournament that I was there, and they came up short by like 3 points in the championship game. I'm looking for them guys to do a little bit of damage in Tennessee. I'm also looking at the Upstate Warriors, a very solid team out of South Carolina that my 313 Hot Boys had the pleasure of playing in South Carolina. It was kind of a home game for them. Obviously, that's where they were from. Road game for us. difficult atmosphere. Those guys played really well. We ended up beating them, but they got a pretty good team. I'm also looking forward to a big-time rematch in this sixth grade division. I think this is what most people want to see. It's kind of set up to go this way in terms of the bracket, I do believe. Unless one of these teams takes an L early, this is a possible championship matchup, and it's a rematch from the South Carolina bid-in tournament, and that would feature the 313 Hot Boys and Team 200. Team 200 is a tough physical team. 313 Hot Boys, tough physical team, and both of them are well coached. Hey, this will be a good one to watch if these teams are fortunate enough to match up. That's what everybody has an eye on in this age group. Let's look at the seventh graders. 18 teams again in this one, and these teams coming from all over. I think there's 9 states represented in the seventh grade division, and those states are Tennessee, South Carolina, Georgia, West Virginia, Kentucky, North Carolina, Maryland, Alabama, Louisiana. There's 2 teams that I've seen on social media in this age group, and that's the Alabama Heat and the Ballerville team from the DMV area in Maryland. Once again, a lot of these teams I've never heard of. It's 18 teams, most of them coming from the deep South. I'm rooted right here in Detroit, Michigan. So, this is one of the reasons why when we travel, I don't just watch our team play. I'll be watching all of these guys play, and next week I'll give you a little more insight on some of these teams. Now, here's where it gets heavy at. This 8th grade division has 32 teams in it, by far the most difficult division to win in this whole Nationals tournament. These teams are coming from Georgia, West Virginia, North Carolina, South Carolina, Alabama, Ohio, Tennessee, Kentucky, Virginia, and Maryland. A couple of big-time hitters in this one. One coming from Kentucky, the Corbin Warriors. One coming from South Carolina, the Carolina Hawks. Definitely will have my eyes out for those guys, trying to see what they're all about, in person. 9th grade division, and you'll see in this national tournament, this is a little opposite from, what we normally cover. We normally cover tournaments that when you get in the high school divisions, the number of teams increase dramatically. But in this tournament in particular, the number of teams decreased dramatically at the high school division. So let's speak on those teams. 9th graders got 12 teams in the 9th grade division, which is still a nice amount of teams, 12 teams. But obviously it's not 32, it's not 18, it's not 14. Let's look at this. Maryland, Georgia, Alabama, Tennessee, South Carolina, Ohio, Kentucky, North Carolina, all represented in the 9th grade division. I'm looking for a team out of Columbus, man. They're traveling, and they've sent more than one team down here. They've sent numerous teams, for this tournament. But I want to see what Columbus 101 has to bring to the table. I want to see what these guys look like in person. And like I always tell you, I want to see how some of these teams travel. What's their fan base like? What's the coaches wearing? How do uniforms look? Do you got something new for nationals? And then the other team is out of Georgia, the Young Stars Elite. I heard a couple of things about these guys. I hear they like to get up and down the court. So, once again, I'm just very excited to see some of these teams in person. Let's look at the 10th graders. 6 teams, only 6 teams, which is still great. Just not what we're, previously discussed. But 6 teams represented from states of North Carolina, Virginia, South Carolina, Alabama. 2 teams I want to look at, South Carolina Spiders. I've seen these guys in person. I've seen them on social media. They seem to have a pretty good 10th grade team. And also a team from Virginia, Team Fly High. New to me. They've been around a while, but I want to see what those guys are bringing to the table. Let's get into the 11th and 12th grade combined division. Has 9 teams. States represented: North Carolina, Ohio, South Carolina, Tennessee, Alabama, Georgia, Virginia. I'm looking for the Georgia Grizzlies and the Alabama Heat to meet up in the championship of this game, because there's only 2 teams really that I know about in this bracket. Now, if that don't get you ready for such an amazing atmosphere that it will be at Nationals, with so many attractions, so many things for the kids, the families, the coaches to do, it's a big deal. It's a very big deal. So we're looking forward to that. And that's where we'll be next week. And, obviously, with us being there next week, this tournament is a 5-day tournament, Wednesday through Sunday. So, next week's podcast will be recorded live from the national tournament held by Teammate Hoops in Pigeon Forge, Tennessee. Real quick, if you guys follow me on Twitter, at 313LifeBrand, last week we put out a poll and asked, out of 4 teams, where do you guys think LeBron James will play next week? Those 4 teams that I put out were the Lakers, the Sixers, the Rockets, Pelicans. Me personally, I want to see him go to the Pelicans. I said that last week. In this poll, it closed with the 76ers being the favorite for where people think LeBron will play next week. Here's the percentages. 76ers, 30%. Houston Rockets, 29%. New Orleans Pelicans, 21%. Los Angeles Lakers, 20%. Now, I'm hearing this week that the Lakers just crushed their chances of getting LeBron with the diss tracks between Lonzo Ball and Kyle Kuzma and that little beef. And I hear that Magic wants no part of that, Magic Johnson. So, you know, it's one thing if you're Magic to say, yeah, I could deal with it. It's another thing from what I'm hearing that he personally told LeBron he'll trade all of them young guys if LeBron will come there. And, you know, for LeBron, that Los Angeles is similar to Miami. You know, that's part of the reason why he went to Miami, if you ask me. Of course, they had a couple of guys he could team up with, but the weather, you know what I mean? Let's be real. You want to be in Cleveland? You know, you want to be in Boston? You want to be in Philly? Or you go where the warm weather is in LA. Let's get to the shout-out portion of this program. First shout-out goes to a very special young man to me. I had the pleasure of coaching this young man when he played Little League football. His name is Sherrod Barnes. He's a 2024 athlete. He plays for the FA Heat basketball team, and he just earned an all-tournament team selection at last week's AAU national qualifier for the state. So big props to Sherrod Barnes doing it in basketball, also doing it in baseball. Good kid right there. Second shout out, 2024, 6th grade, Hot Boys. I told you these guys were going to Flint last weekend, hostile territory, the only team from down in this area to go up there, and we came away with a championship. And, you know, it was crazy because the first game these 6th graders played, they had to play against 8th and 9th graders, and they still beat them by 1 point with a big-time buzzer beater by our guy, Derek Miller. So congratulations to the Hot Boys. Ice in his veins for Derek Miller, big-time shot. Third shout-out goes to the 2025 Hot Boys. They're involved in their second tournament, only their second tournament. It's in Rochester Hills this weekend. We wish them guys the best of luck. They won the first tournament that they were all, playing together for the first time. And we're looking for big things out of the 2025 boys. They're kind of following the same path that our 6th graders 2024 took. Hey, we talked to Ruben Tompkins from Urban Underdogs Basketball. Big time shout out for him. I told you next week we're recording live from the Nationals tournament, Pigeon Forge, Tennessee, hosted by Teammate Basketball. Follow them on Twitter at Teammate Hoops. Until next week, I'm Gus Weaver. You just listened to Travel Basketball with me. Thanks for tuning in.